Watch this.
There's something you could keep in your car that could one day save you or your family, and it costs less than a tank of gas. You know, car fires are more frequent than you might think, and one Idaho man has had to use his extinguisher more frequently than most.
Those are my babies. I tell you, we love those horses.
But now those horses are being called upon to carry out a job by carrying a police officer in Caldwell's first ever mounted patrol, a bit of nostalgia being debuted on our nation's birthday. You know who else is having a big day this week? Idaho. Today we celebrate being a state for 134 years, but it took a few years and some family connections to make it happen. You know, this time of year, fireworks are top of mind when it comes to the dangers of things catching fire. The foothills, a home, a car. We know of two car fires just this week in the Treasure Valley already. The latest coming to a tragic conclusion last night after a woman lost control and crashed her car on the Boise bench. The car caught fire, and while she and her passenger were still inside, witnesses were able to pull the man out of the car, but they couldn't get the woman out until Boise Fire showed up and put out the fire. She ended up dying at the hospital, sadly. The passenger is still there in critical condition. National Fire Protection Association estimates nearly 300,000 vehicles catch fire each year in the United States. It's about 33 cars every hour. The fire can come from an oil leak, electrical short, or even just poor maintenance. One man in Kuna has seen his fair share of those, stepping in to save 4 drivers from car fires in just 5 years. And he isn't burnt out just yet. Hunter Funk shares what makes him a perfect match for drivers needing help.
5 years ago,
I was heading through the mountains and I saw a Buick on the side of the road and I saw smoke coming out of it.
a small extinguisher wasn't able to put out the car fire.
I hit the dirt and locked up the brakes and jumped out of my truck.
But from that moment on, it ignited Michael Van Vechten's drive to step in when things get hot.
It was something that bothered me that I didn't do it, you know, as silly as that is. And I just always had one in my vehicle from then, and you know, on a couple of different occasions, I just saw people pulling over because their vehicle was smoking.
Van Vechten says he now carries a large 5-pound extinguisher in every vehicle. He's helped a college student with a fire under the hood.
After we get it out, he looks at me and says, man, all my laptop and everything, all my stuff in here that I couldn't have replaced, you know, thank you.
And last week, his most recent save. A woman driving a pilot truck had an oil leak that caught fire as she was driving down the interstate.
I jumped out of my truck and grabbed my fire extinguisher and pulled the pin and ran over there. Because we were there with fire extinguishers and, you know, it was just an oil leak. And the fire got put out and there was no significant damage to the vehicle and, you know, that truck and all that equipment, and goodness knows how much it's all worth. It all got saved.
Kuna Fire Chief TJ Lawrence says he hopes more people are like Van Vechten because it can help prevent a lot of damage.
It just adds another safety factor, whether it's your own vehicle or you come across another vehicle that is beginning to catch on fire, or a small grass fire that was caused by a vehicle parking on dry grasses. It just gives you an opportunity to help with your extinguisher. And you might get that fire extinguished before the fire department even gets there and save property. And it's just a fantastic idea.
Chief Lawrence says no matter what, call 911 in any fire situation first. Then, if the fire is in the beginning stages, an extinguisher works great. But if that fire gets too large, do not risk it. Lawrence says if you ever need to use an extinguisher, remember this acronym.
It's called PASS, P-A-S-S. You pull the pin, you aim low, you squeeze the handle, and then you sweep at the base of the fire.
After a hot streak of helping people, Van Vechten hopes it'll spark the desire for others to step in and do the same.
I've had a lot of people help me in my day, and you know, a lot of people be there for me when they owed me nothing. So what is it a big deal to put a $30, $35 fire extinguisher in my truck and be able to help somebody out when I get an opportunity?
Now, it is important to note, the chief says, to get your fire extinguisher inspected every year and take time to learn how to use one so you're more prepared before you step in.
Okay, so he carries like a 5-pound fire extinguisher, which seems pretty large. You don't need something that size, do you?
Not necessarily. He says it's more effective, right, if it's a bigger fire, and it can help cool it off. But no, about a 2-pound one, and you can find dozens and dozens online too for $30 to $35.
Okay, that's awesome. All right, so just kind of look for the one that fits you and your car best.
Yeah, another big note too, I'm going to add, make sure it's clipped into the car.
Sure.
The fire chief was like, you don't want that being thrown around in your car and becoming an object that could hurt you. So.
Or tough to get to because it's stuck under the seat.
Exactly.
All right, thanks, Hunter. Well, speaking of putting out fires, and our annual reminder that shooting off aerial fireworks in Idaho is illegal, despite the fact you can buy them in Idaho, prompted the perennial pointing out how ridiculous the proximity of those 2 points together is, and how it's all totally fine as long as the person buying the illegal fireworks signs a piece of paper promising to not shoot them off in the state. But bringing up that point led Rick in Boise to text in, that affidavit that fireworks stands ask you to sign is a complete fiction. There's nothing in Idaho code that allows that. Okay, so you're saying my signature on this little piece of paper isn't worth the paper it's written on? According to the former state attorney general, that part is true. In 1997, Idaho added a fireworks act to its books, and it laid out what is allowed and what is not allowed when it comes to combustible celebrations. It covered topics like wholesalers, retailers, permits, when they can be sold and by whom. Aerial fireworks are described as special fireworks in this act, designed for display. And because they are more dangerous, well, they're covered by the U.S. Bureau of Explosives. They sound pretty important. Okay, so let's jump ahead 20 years. And dozens of wildfires that ended up being started by illegal fireworks in Idaho over that time span. In 2017, realizing this promise not to use them wasn't working very well, especially on the heels of a 2,500-acre fire near Boise's Table Rock, Boise Representative Matt Erpelding tried to get a bill passed to outlaw the sale of them altogether.
This comes down to a mistake in the original drafting and a loophole in the bill. So it was never intended that we do retail sales of aerial fireworks inside of Idaho.
However, that bill was never even introduced. The House State Affairs Committee voted 9-6 to not even allow it to be printed, much less get a public hearing. Those who voted against it said, well, because it wouldn't apply to Native American reservations. That's why they voted against it.
You would have one faction that would still be able to sell these, and no one else could. In my mind, I couldn't get past that. I just didn't feel like it was fair.
Are we going to continue this uneven playing field where the tribes are given exception because we have no jurisdiction over them, and we continue to regulate private parties to the disadvantage of private parties?
Because we couldn't regulate what happens on a reservation, we just said we're not doing it. So, okay. Representative Erpelding said he wasn't going to let it go either. Months later, he let it be known he asked then Attorney General Lawrence Wasden for an opinion on our fireworks regulations. And one of the questions he wanted answered, whether the whole signing of an affidavit was even legal, if it was even consistent with the language and intent of Idaho's Fireworks Act. Paul Panther, the chief of the Criminal Law Division, well, he answered that question with this opinion. He said the Fireworks Act neither requires nor prohibits a seller from getting an affidavit from a buyer where they promise not to sell or use them in the state. Sure, they can require it if they want to, but there's no law that says they have to. Panther went on to point out the Fireworks Act makes it very clear those special fireworks can only be sold to a person with a permit to use them in a public display or event, and only within a reasonable time period before that event. So many took that opinion to mean aerial fireworks are now illegal to buy in Idaho without a permit. However, it was just an opinion, and enforcement of it was left up to the individual counties, as laid out in the 1997 Act. And it was left up to interpretation. For example, in 2017, when that opinion came out, Elmore County Sheriff said they would enforce the new interpretation. Ada County Sheriff's Office, not so much, saying it was still unclear whether private citizens could buy aerial fireworks in Idaho. So here's what we do know. Those affidavits, as Rick pointed out, there's nothing in Idaho code allowing for that. But, as we also learned, they can still require them to absolve themselves from any obligation should any damages come from, I don't know, one of their bottle rockets sparking a 2,500-acre fire in the Boise foothills. However, if you do want to turn in your neighbors for illegal fireworks this holiday season, dispatch says, Ada County Dispatch says you can text them instead of calling them to help reduce the amount of calls they get on the 4th. You just got to report those issues that don't involve an active fire or medical emergency. Then you can text Ada County at the number that's at the bottom of the screen, Dispatch can then focus on those 911 emergency calls by themselves. You know, there was a time when it was common to come across a police officer patrolling on the back of a horse. Mounted officers weren't just something seen in parades. They'd be at events, they'd be in the foothills, they'd be along the Boise Greenbelt. Boise's mounted patrol unit, that was active for like 18 years. They dismounted and then disbanded back in 2005. But another Treasure Valley Police Department is dipping back into the area's affinity for four hooves. Aspen Shumpert spent some time in Canyon County where they're trying to kickstart their very first horse unit.
The Caldwell Police Department is taking the reins on a nostalgic way of patrolling. This move comes after a few officers rode their personal horses to patrol a handful of events last year, including Lieutenant John Tucker.
You have a community like Caldwell that is it's an agricultural community. It is it's a Western lifestyle.
Perfect for Einstein and Lonnie, the first two horses owned by the Codwell Police Mounted Unit Foundation. They're both 7-year-old draft horses, a breed popular for police work because of their size and stamina.
And it weighs probably about 2,300 pounds.
When CPD announced the start of their first ever horse unit, a ranch in Albuquerque, New Mexico wanted to help out.
And then she let me know that they were needing horses too. And I said, well, I might be able to help out with that.
Robert Vick has been working with draft horses since 2010. For years, he donated bits for horses to the Albuquerque's unit, which has been active for more than 46 years. Now, he runs the facility where those horses stay. The Albuquerque unit has 12 horses. Lonnie and Einstein didn't quite fit their criteria. At just over 19 hands, Vic says Lonnie was too big.
We trained him to ride and how to do everything that he needed to do. And made him perfect for the Caldwell Police Department.
And Einstein is spotted, and the department wanted a unit with all black or all white draft horses.
He's a really good boy. He was already used to walking in the river and rural areas, and he did great adapting to cars.
Vic donated Lonnie and Einstein to the Codwell Police Mounted Unit Foundation. The two draft horses have spent the last several weeks with a group of Codwell officers, some of whom are getting back in the saddle, others riding for the first time.
A couple of these people have only been out here twice, and we've worked with them, and now they're already picking hooves and brushing and saddling and putting bridles on. It's pretty nice to see.
To start, the Codwell horses will be just at events, working their way up to patrolling the streets.
Horses are wonderful at moving large groups of people, so crowd control is one of our fortes. I ride a horse named Nigel. Nigel's 18 and a half hands. He is a big boy. But that vantage point, being 8 to 10 feet off the ground, definitely helps us to see into crowds much better. When it comes to civil disturbances and having to move large crowds.
But it also breaks down a barrier between law enforcement and the public.
We've had guys over the years, or folks over the years, that have flat out told us they would have fought us had it not been for the horses. So it helps to calm a situation down as well. Even the most hardened of criminals that we've seen over the years, where you see the guy with the face tattoos that generally would not want to come talk to us, he'll bring his kid out to come talk to us.
Vic and the Albuquerque officers say they're excited for Lonnie and Einstein's patrolling future in Idaho.
I can't wait to see them having 12 horses out there just like we do here.
The Codwell Police Mounted Unit is completely funded by donations, everything from the donated horses themselves to their hay and bridles. Lieutenant Tucker says they already have enough hay for the year for 6 horses. Taxpayers' money will only be used to pay the patrolling officers. Brian.
Okay, so they can't wait to see them having 12 horses. When are we going to see them out on their horses?
Yeah, they're going to make their debut tomorrow at the 4th of July festivities. And if you don't get to see them tomorrow, they'll also be at the Caldwell Night Rodeo in August.
And I was asking you about the agility. Draft horses, not known for that, but I guess that makes sense. They're not really, doing anything that requires a lot of agility, so I guess it makes sense to have the size.
Yeah, right. The size does matter.
Yeah, it does. It really does. All right, thanks, Aspen. All right, well, other parties in Canyon County, Nampa getting their patriotic party started early, right after, today's show on the 208. You head over to the God and Country Festival for the free event to enjoy the Valley's first set of official fireworks. I believe Boise Hawks are also doing their fireworks tonight, too. Abby Wilt has details on that and other 208 news in today's 411.
The Payette Fire Department responded to a grass fire yesterday and then a house fire just minutes later. Multiple agencies had to help with the house fire because the Payette Fire Department says they were stretched thin at the time. Speaking of, are you interested in being a volunteer firefighter? The Payette Fire Department says they're always looking for more. After testimony from the public and business owners over parking meters in downtown Caldwell hurting business, City Council and the mayor didn't even make a decision. But they did decide to continue the discussion later this month. Downtown Caldwell businesses want to get rid of the meters, but the city is trying to meet in the middle on the meters. Kicking off the Valley's 4th of July celebration is the God and Country Festival today in Nampa. Head to the amphitheater at the Ford Idaho Center tonight at 5:30 to enjoy music, food, and then the City of Nampa's fireworks show starting at dusk, which is around 10:15. The non-denominational event is free for all, but you do have to pay $5 for parking. You can find a full rundown of all the 4th of July events in southwestern Idaho and eastern Oregon on our website at ktvb.com. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Wilt.
The day before Independence Day is a holiday in and of itself for many people. It's Disobedience Day, the true foundation of liberty. It's a National Fried Clam Day. It's National Eat Your Beans Day, International Plastic Bag Free Day. But Idahoans, well, we like to recognize it as the day Idaho joined the Union, Statehood Day. It's a series of events that you maybe didn't realize ended up being more of a family affair. The discovery of gold in 1860 brought multitudes of miners, merchants, and those on the margins to the area to make their mark. In an effort to keep those metals and minerals all in the family, Abraham Lincoln signed the Congressional Act to make Idaho an official territory of the United States on March 4, 1863. The original borders extended over most of present-day Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Montana then gained territorial status a year later, followed by Wyoming 4 years after that. Which is how, by 1868, the shape of Idaho as we know it was pretty much set, but not quite in stone. In 1887, Congress passed a bill that would split the Idaho Territory in two, portioning the panhandle part to Washington, while the South would be absorbed by Nevada. But because of certain family ties, President Grover Cleveland refused to sign it as a favor to Territorial Governor Edward Stevenson, who just happened to be the cousin of the vice president, Adlai Stevenson. Meanwhile, another lineage link would work to push Idaho into statehood status. Fred T. Dubois, whose father was apparently a close crony of Lincoln, was elected as a territorial delegate to Congress in 1889. Dubois' influence worked, and a year later, he watched President Benjamin Harrison sign the admission bill, making Idaho the 43rd state in the Union on July 3, 1890.
We just have some of the best sunsets here in Idaho. Beautiful view in those pictures. And today, if you're looking out the window and you think it looks pretty pleasant outside, you would not be wrong. We've got more of those temperatures in the 80s in valley locations, 70s in the mountains, couple mountain spots that are a little bit warmer, closer to 80 degrees. And similarly over in the Magic Valley, right at that 80-degree mark for the high today. But we've got to talk about tomorrow. It's the 4th of July. I know many of us will be planning some of those activities for outdoors. So let's talk about the weather. If I had to sum up your weather as a whole across the region, it will be a touch warmer. The winds in valley areas will be a little bit less, and we'll have just as much sunshine. So things will be a little bit warmer in those valley areas, with highs expected to be right around the 90s or low 90s. You can see the mountains are the cooler places to be, with those high 70s and low 80s for the high. And you can see a little bit more breezy as we're in the Twin Falls area. So overall, your outdoor barbecue or picnic is looking really good. We are expected again to get into low 90s for some of those evening areas in the valleys. So just know pop-up tent would be great to have. You probably don't need as much items to hold down paper napkins or the paper plates, with the exception of the Magic Valley, where it'll be just a touch more breezy. But as we switch more gears toward this weekend, just know we are expecting especially hot temperatures to be sticking around for a long time. And in the Treasure Valley, that will mean a stretch of consecutive triple-digit temperatures. So all of these things are something that we'll have to consider for quite a while. When we talk about the heat waves, there's two factors that we consider: how intense they're going to be and how long they're going to last. So this one in particular will be both. It will be very long lasting and also intense. We'll get close to breaking some records as we get towards the midpoint of next week, but you can see those triple-digit temperatures starting to kick in this weekend. So the 90-degree temperature that we're expecting for tomorrow may feel especially mild with all of this heat on the way. So just know things will be heating up for your 7-day forecast.
All right, welcome back to this day before Independence Day 208 episode. Let's get to some of the comments, especially today. We got one about the fire extinguishers and putting them in your cars. Let's take a look at that one first, if possible. Right there. There it is. It's important to remember, do not open the hood all the way. If you have a car fire, don't open the hood all the way, especially if that fire obviously is in the engine. With the hood cracked open, use the extinguisher. Fire loves oxygen. An open hood feeds that fire. That's coming from a former volunteer firefighter. Then we got this comment. Didn't send a name with that one, but we'll leave it to Idaho. Lawmakers talk out of both sides of their mouths when it comes to the fireworks laws. That's from Larry, meaning we don't like them, but we also don't want to get rid of them, I guess. Finally, this one is from, who's it from? From Margie. Wants to know if reservations are free to sell fireworks, should the legislature pass laws making them illegal? What about abortions? Since they can't regulate what happens on a reservation, well, that's actually been prohibited by the Hyde Act in the 1970s because most Native Americans get their health from the Indian Health Service, which is the Department of the Health and Human Services. So the Hyde Act says no federal funding for any abortions ever. So not likely.